And now it is my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, Sally R. from Santa Barbara.
Good evening. My name is Sally, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to welcome the newcomers. I want to tell you what I heard when I first got here, and it was that you don't have to do this alone anymore, and you don't have to drink ever again if you don't want to, and you don't have to drink ever again if you do want to. I've found that to be true. That's my experience. I want to thank Lucinda for driving me up here. Lucinda is my best friend, and we just became best friends like a year ago when my son called me and said, "Hey, Mom, I just found the girl I'm going to marry and have babies with." And I said, "Well, that's really cool." And he said, "No, what's really cool is that her mom's a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous." And so 6 weeks ago, we became grandmas together, two sober grandmas, you know, and their kids. Oh my God, I just set my watch for 2 hours and 44 minutes, so you got a long time with me tonight. Woo! Anyway, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I like how people say I'm going to get some housekeeping out of the way. I'm going to get some housekeeping out of the way. I have a sobriety date. That's 8/18/18. I have a sponsor. She knows she's my sponsor. I have a tradition sponsor. He's here tonight, and he heard me say my last name in an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm sure I'll hear about that later. But yeah, I'm going to get right to it, man, because I think that it's important. You know, in the preface, at the end of the preface of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I also love the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a big book nerd. It says in the very last part of the preface, it says, "If you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me, or more important, yes, I felt like that, or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me." And the 42 personal stories in the back of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous are there for identification. I'm up here for identification. I love to perform, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I have a story, and I hope that my story, my experience, strength, and hope, you can identify with it. And more important, that you can see that you can have recovery. I've found recovery here in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I think the first time I actually, like looking back, that I understood that I had a problem with the way I felt about myself and the world around me was when my sister was born, when I was 4 years old. And my parents moved my bed into the hallway and moved her crib into their bedroom. And I realized that I wasn't the center of the universe. So I decided that I needed to become the center of the universe. And I decided I would do anything to get the attention, especially of my father, anything that it took. My father was a cocaine dealer. And so I didn't start drinking till I was like 14, 15, which is late, I know, for an alcoholic. But that's because I was doing cocaine with my dad. When I was 9 years old, my dad had traded tickets he had some deal, and he traded tickets to see Annie at the Pantages Theater. And that was gonna be our Christmas present. So he was getting ready to load us all into the car and take us down to LA. And I had this ear infection. And I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home, and I wanted my grandma to take care of me. My grandmother was a nurse, so she would have been the perfect person to take care of me. But my dad said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I know what to do." And he took a little dollar bill, and he rolled it up, and he put a bunch of cocaine there, and he blew it up my nose. And we drove down to the Good Earth Cafe, and we went and had lunch, and I wasn't hungry, and I thought, this is great. I was pudgy then too, and I thought, like a pudgy kid like me, this is what I need, something to help me lose a little weight. And then And then we got down there, and at the intermission, my dad took me to go to the bathroom, and I asked if he had any more of that stuff because it made me feel different. And so, you know, fast forward a few years, we were living on the Mesa, and I got introduced to these guys called the Mesa Rats. And they had beer. And they said the way that you become one of us is that you go over to the Love Foundation and you steal beer off the beer truck that's delivering beer to their party. So I did that, and I ran down to the steps, and we sat on this platform, and we were listening to the English Beat and the Clash, and we were dancing and drinking beer. And I drank more than anybody that night. I was smashed. And the next day I woke up, and I was a Mesa Rat, and I was ready to party with those guys. And I partied with those guys, and I had nicknames, and I was carried home and dumped on my front yard. And I had a problem drinking then, but I didn't see it because I went and did the Ironman triathlon. And I was working with Julia Child, and I was cooking for all these famous people. So I didn't have a problem. But when I got with those friends, I always overdrank. But I was like the front man for our family, so I had to be like good, right? Do the Ironman triathlon, dancing as fast as I could, entertaining the crowd, so that no one could see that my dad was dealing coke, dying of this disease, right? Right in the house. So I got married to an amazing, lovely man, beautiful human being, normal guy, not an alcoholic, not a drug addict, nothing. And we had 3 beautiful, absolutely gorgeous children. Gorgeous children. We were both in the same profession. We were both chefs. And we both had so much promise in Santa Barbara. People wanted us to open bakeries and restaurants and so much promise. But you see, I had this problem. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I measured up. I was like Bill Wilson, you know, like I could succeed, but then I would pull it all down. I could get a job working for the wealthiest people in Montecito, but then somehow I would do something where I would pull it all down. And my husband just kept saying, like, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. But I never felt okay. And there was my dad over there, you know, like now he was into pills and he was into all kinds of things. And I was into those things with him. And I don't know if you know the song Janis Joplin, where she says, it's me and Bobby McGee, and she says, windshield wipers slap in time. I was holding Bobby's hand in mine. We sang every song that driver knew. My dad and I sang every fucking song that driver knew. We were like Bonnie and Clyde. We were like me and Bobby McGee. But my dad's disease was progressed farther than mine, right? And he had no solution. No solution. He had never been to AA, NA, church, nothing. And my family was atheist, right? Like so atheist. And except for my mom, who came home from a psychic reading one time with a recording that told her that she was a reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. So I have a mom that's Mary Magdalene and a dad that's Bobby McGee, and I'm wanting to be Barbra Streisand, right? A Star is Born. But it was crazy, just bonkers. And I was married with these 3 perfect kids, living in a perfect neighborhood. I was a T-ball mom and this and that and running a healthy lunch program. But I hated myself unless I had a substance inside of me changing the way I felt. And so I was working at the school as the lunch lady, and I got a phone call, and it was a police officer, and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at work." And he said, I need to have someone drive you to Cottage Hospital. And I thought, oh, this sounds bad. Sounds really bad. And I knew my husband worked at Cottage Hospital as the chef there. So I had the secretary drive me down there, and I went into a room, and there was a sheriff there, and he said, I need you to sit down. Here's a glass of water, and here's a Polaroid picture. And it was my dead dad. Without a solution, my dad's only solution was to get the hell out of here, right? And I went to his hotel room to get all of his pills because I was going to need a lot of pills now. It's going to need a lot of substance to get through this one. And I knew he had pills in Motel 6 in Carpinteria. I don't know if you know that hotel, but that's where he was found. He just put 3 ounces of cocaine in a bottle of water and chugged it and stopped his heart. But in that room were pictures of me, my brother, my sister, my kids. Oh, poor guy had no solution, right? So the next week, my husband said to me, like, you seem so sad. Well, I was taking like bars of Xanax at a time. Of course I wasn't sad. Or I was sad. I was glum. I was a glum lot. And I said, well, you know what you can do? You can leave. And you can take the kids with you. Please, just get the hell out of here. I was protecting the kids, right? But I didn't know that at the time. I just wanted to get my party on, right? And so for years, that's what I did. I lived on people's sofas. I rented people's rooms. I was in the hospital a lot. And jail. Hospitals, jails, institutions. That was it for me, right? And I wound up in an Airbnb as the keeper, the groundskeeper or something. And the people that were running the Airbnb noticed I was falling in the pool, falling in the koi pond, going in and out of the Airbnb when no one was there, coming out with their bottles of alcohol, because by this time I had to drink every 15 minutes. I was at that point drinking. I was at the jumping off point, right? And so my bosses sat me down, the people that own the Airbnb, and said, we've got to do something about you. You've got to do something, or we're gonna kick you out of here, and you'll have no place to live. And I'd had a boyfriend that went to Alcoholics Anonymous. He was a recovering heroin addict with like a lot of time. And I said, I'll go to AA. And they said, great. Let's find out how you get to AA. I'd never been to AA before. And so they called down at central office in Santa Barbara. And some guy named Tim Whitcomb answered the phone. And they said, we got this person here who's willing to go to a meeting. And he said, where are you? Because that's what we're supposed to do when we get a 12-step call, right? Where are you? Let me find you. We'll come get you. And he said, well, you're walking distance away from a meeting right there, like in a half an hour. So my bosses said, are you willing to go? And I said, sure. I thought they were just going to let me go. And then I would just stay in the parking lot and come back. So I went to my little room, not apartment. I called it an apartment, but it was a room. And guzzled the last of a bottle of gin I had underneath my sink, threw up in my hand, thought I saw a Vicodin in there, ate the Vicodin and the vomit. There was no Vicodin. And put on 2 different shoes, and walked over to the Way of Life meeting in Santa Barbara with my boss. And not only did he walk me over, but he walked in with me. And not only were there all of these happy, sober people, that ex-boyfriend was there. And I did not want him to know that I had a problem. But when they said, does anyone with less than 30 days want to stand up and say their name? I shot up and said my name. And then I said I was sorry. And I sat back down, and I heard something in that speaker meeting, and it was something about getting a checking account. And I thought I could really use a checking account right about now. So I thought, well, if you get a checking account here, then I'm willing to come. So they gave me a list of temporary sponsors. There was 3 names on the list. I called one of them, and she didn't have enough time. I called another one of them, and she wasn't taking new sponsees. And the third one I called said, I'll be right over. She came over. She took me to a meeting. She brought me a big book, and she read the preface with me. And she came over every single day and read that book with me. And she took me to meetings like in the garage, was called a sponsor meeting. And she got me working with others, right? And so the third meeting that I went to, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, was a meeting in a garage of a recovery home called the Stalwart House up in Santa Barbara, and it was called Big Book Comes Alive, and it was led by a guy named Ken H., and he was reading out of the Big Book, and the page that they were on was 18 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. There is a solution. And what they were reading was this part where it says, warped lives of blameless children. And I suddenly realized what I'd done. It took that long for me to realize what I'd done. Not only what I'd done, but what I was. A warped life, and I was warping lives, right? So I was willing to get really, really busy in this program. And I did exactly what I was told, like a recipe, just like a recipe. You get that box cake mix, and on the front, it's a beautiful, fluffy cake. And on the back, there's directions. You don't just get the cake and open it up and pour it into a bowl and start throwing things in it. It says 3 eggs, third of a cup of oil, a cup of water, mix it up for this amount of time, put it in this size of pan, put it in the oven for this amount of time. And even if you don't believe you're going to get a cake, you're going to get a cake. And that's how I worked this program. I didn't believe what all of you people were saying. I didn't believe that I, too, could have what all of you had. Because I came in here with 2 different shoes, breath that smelled like vomit, a bedazzled shirt with drool on it. I wanted to die when I got here. And 3 months into this program, I was over at Bethel House picking up newcomers. 6 months into this program, my youngest son reached out to me and asked me if I could bake brownies for his girlfriend. Those are the most important brownies I've ever baked in my whole entire life. And it took a while for people to come back because I'd hurt them. But I could see that I'd hurt them. I could see that now. And I was willing to make an amends, just like it says in the steps. I was willing to make an amends. And the biggest amends I had to do was to their father, the one I told to get out, take the kids with them. So when I was about 2.5 years sober, he contacted me and he said, all right, I'm ready, let's go. I said, where do you want to go? And he said, let's go to the beach where we had our first kiss. And we went there and I made a beautiful amends to him. And we were planning on going to Alaska and seeing the birth of our 3rd grandbaby and yada, yada, yada. And 6 months later, he died. And I don't know, if I made a conscious decision about this, but I know that it was something that happened. I kind of thought, well, fuck God. I had a plan with this guy. Screw this. And I went to visit my son in New York. I quit my job. I went to Alaska, cashed out my 401k, and went to work in a coffee shop. And this Tim Whitcomb guy, that guy was relentless, man. He would come in that coffee shop and say, so I haven't seen you at a meeting for a while. What are you doing in here? And I'd say, look at the fritters, the avocado toast. I'm busy, dude. And he was a smart guy about people that are addicts and alcoholics. And he said, why don't you make some of those fritters and bring over to my meeting I have at my house on Sundays? We could use some fritters. Fine. So I went over there with fritters, and that was the only meeting I went to. And I went batshit crazy, let me tell you what, because I wasn't working this program like I'd been working it. I got fired from that job for being batshit crazy at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I realized we step on the toes of our fellows, and they retaliate. And I told the boss that fired me, can I just stay here until 6:30 because I don't trust myself? He said, fine, just don't talk to me. So I finished what I was doing, and I went to the harbor. I went back to my home group. And I sat down, and I told them what had happened. And I called Tim Whitcomb, and I told him what had happened. And he said, great. They're having a big luncheon at Newhouse, and I've got a table there. You're coming with me. And that man took me under his wing when I was crazy but not using drugs. And he told me all along, you should be doing something in recovery. You should be cooking, using your talents in recovery. And I said, I am. But I have this bigger life. I cook for Elton John. I cook for Barbra Streisand. And he's, don't you know who I am? And he said, you don't know who you are. And when you figure it out, you're going to want to work in recovery. And the weird thing is God has a funny sense of humor, right? Because on the day of Tim Whitcomb's memorial, I made all the food, I organized the whole thing. I got an offer letter from the recovery home where I'm working at and cooking today. I want to tell you that my relationship with my children is mended. Some all the way, some not all the way. I just got back from Alaska visiting my daughter and my granddaughters. The oldest granddaughter was born when I was still out there, and I found out that she was born when I was getting my party on at Henry's Beach at 9 o'clock in the morning with a bottle of Skinny Girl margarita. And someone approached me that was going for a nice beach walk with their dog and said, hey, congratulations, Grandma. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, Sarah had a baby this morning. And Sarah had decided she wasn't going to tell me that she'd had a baby. I just got back from visiting them in Alaska. I was there for the birth of her third baby because I had made that promise to my ex-husband, that we would go back for the birth of that baby. My younger son, that relationship has been amended. I'm a good person these days because of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I work Alcoholics Anonymous as hard as I worked my disease. And I make mistakes. I said my last name when I got up here. And I've made bigger mistakes than that, But I have this process of looking at my mistakes, seeing what character defect is being involved, and asking God promptly to remove that character defect and promptly doing an amends. I believe in this program because this program saved my life. This program gave my kids their mother back. Gave my grandkids a grandmother that they'll never have to see drunk or high or dead from this disease. I'm serious about this program. I've seen people die. I've seen my dad die. And I've seen people make miraculous recoveries. Bill Wilson talks about it. Like, we're miracles of mental health, he says. Alcoholics? But we are. And, I was diagnosed by a doctor with stage 4 alcoholism about a month and a half before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. He gave me all the paperwork. He said, don't stop drinking until you get into one of these places. And he watched me go into the parking lot and throw that stuff in the garbage. And he said to his wife that night, I think I'm going to lose this woman who has 3 children. And I go see that doctor every 6 months, and he sends me sponsees. Because this program works. So I try not to get emotional about this program because I try to show you that I'm taking it seriously. But inside, my heart has bursted wide open because I get to help other alcoholics with my story. And I was told that, this dark story that you have, this sadness, that one day will be your greatest asset. That's your superpower. And tonight I was so excited to come down here and share my story with you because if it touches one person, then that's all that matters to me. So thank you for asking me to share, and I love you all. And if there's anything I can ever do for any of you, I'm here. Thank you.